Today, we are very lucky to have as our guest the cybersecurity consultant, Dorothy Hill. We will talk today about how cybersecurity, how this month is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and a little bit about Dorothy's participation in a panel discussion, Preventing a Ransomware Attack, that is part of a ransomware webinar series put on by FTF entitled Ransomware, Wall Street and Beyond. So Dorothy has developed her expertise over the years by working for McKinsey & Company in Germany and in the United Kingdom. She has also worked for 6 years with Goldman Sachs in Germany, Japan, France, and the UK, overseeing credit risk and technology management concerns. Since 2014, Dorothy has been a consultant and advisor in cybersecurity and compliance. Her areas of expertise include anti-money laundering, financial crime investigation, regulatory reporting, and risk management. In addition to being a national speaker on cybersecurity threat awareness and prevention, Dorothy can address the concerns of the global financial services regulatory landscape. So Dorothy, welcome to FTF News Live.
Thank you, Eugene. I really appreciate that and great to be with you today.
So we'll just jump into the questions. First, the Biden White House officially announced that October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month and pledged to fight against cyber attacks and against ransomware networks. And a few hours before we went live, the Biden administration asked Russia to take more action against ransomware groups based in Russia. So given that backdrop, what does cybersecurity awareness mean for financial services firms and their clients?
Yes, it's extremely important. It's literally the set of topics that keep people awake at night. If one is on the board or what they call the chief information security officer of a bank, it's front and center to what the bank does in terms of protecting the assets and the data. The information flows with their respective vendors in and out of the bank. For example, Cybersecurity Awareness Month at a British client for whom I worked a few years ago, it was done with great panache. They had signs everywhere in the hallway, on the digital screens. They ran a speaker series. They brought in a former FBI agent to speak about cybersecurity and the importance of this, also to raise awareness of the threat landscape. What types of people are attempting to hack into, I'd say, the three top targets and here in the US are the financial system, the energy grid, and the healthcare network, including hospitals and doctors' offices. So yes, it's extremely important whether you're the CEO or CISO of a small company and you're protecting your data and your marketing lists, all the way up to Fortune 100 companies, including major global banks, which operate in hundreds of countries around the globe.
Is it a little difficult for financial services firms to talk about cybersecurity issues?
Yes, it is. Oh, I should stand corrected. It may not be hundreds of countries, maybe 130 plus, but it is, and because it's really, it's a data privacy issue in some cases. When there's an attempted hack of a bank, there are protocols that are required by the bank's respective regulator, whether that's the Fed or the US Department of Treasury, OCC, or even New York State Department of Financial Services here in New York, where many banks have a license to operate in the state of New York, as one example. Yes, they talk about it in various mainstream articles. For example, JP Morgan will state how much money they've invested in cybersecurity, how many people they're planning to hire, that investment over a period of time. But when it comes to specific attacks and attempts to access data of the banks, either directly and or through their vendors, it's not something that they're going to disclose to the public. They're going to work with their respective cybersecurity vendors. And as I mentioned before, file an escalation or an incident report, it's called, within a certain period of time as mandated by regulations.
Mm-hmm. And how is cybersecurity related to the recent rise in ransomware attacks?
So ransomware is it's a type of cybersecurity threat. It's increasing, not just here in the US, but globally. We talk about the threat landscape. Again, we have state actors like Iran, China, Russia, where you have institutionalized individuals operating within a highly organized criminal syndicate, attempting to obtain data. And the main reason is not because it's fun or someone sitting in their mother's basement. It's mostly done for financial gain. So ransomware, the ransom part entails a ransom that is demanded of the victim, and the ware part refers to like the software, because it's basically code that they are able to integrate into the system, or operating, not necessarily the operating system, but it might be sitting latent within a server, or it may be sitting within a database, and it sits there sort of quietly waiting for a certain command to execute. And at that point, the person who has been the victim of this compromise and this breach will receive a notification. Your data has been compromised. In the very simple terms, wire, $1.5 million to this account. Many criminals around the globe, whether it's a state actor or an individual, a very experienced hacker, for example, a cybersecurity criminal, cyber criminal, we call them, may have a cryptocurrency account and may require a cryptocurrency transfer from like a Bitcoin wallet, what have you. So it's not like, oh, go to your JP Morgan local branch and wire me the money. They're smart. They know that those types of wire transfers and even cash deposits can be traced to an electronic payment, to a video surveillance at the branch. So they use very savvy other means to obtain the funds that they demand from the victim.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the more effective cybersecurity measures that firms can take to prevent a ransomware attack?
Right. You just nailed it. It's prevent, prevent, prevent. So the most important aspect is training and education. That whether it's a large bank or a small company, is to teach its employees and consultants and contractors not to click on suspicious links, not to go to websites that are not well known. Many times the cyber criminals will embed the code even within a video, or you click on the video, or you click on a comment. It's very hard for people to know, especially young people who are not trained in this. So prevention is key, educating them. What's very common within the global financial services sector, especially here in the US, is that the IT department conducts periodic phishing exercises to test people on their knowledge and training to ensure that they don't click on that link. So if they do click on it, they will be required to take additional training. If they do not click on it, they will receive, for example, an email saying, thank you for protecting us, the firm, stay vigilant. That's so critical. Again, stay vigilant. Other things that companies can do is, obviously, if they don't have the internal capability to prevent malware, ransomware, and other types of cybersecurity threats, they really have to have a vendor. There are many strong vendors here in the US. They can avail themselves of those services, and also make sure the vendor is constantly checking the threat landscape and scouring, the networks and systems 24/7 to detect any bugs that may be an opportunity or sort of a wormhole for that particular code to make its way through. We always hear about large firms like Target, where their lists are compromised or they're stolen, but this is very, very specific ransomware. It does pertain, again, specifically to a ransom being demanded. And one of the most important lessons, Eugene, is don't pay the ransom. Get on the phone immediately with your IT provider, with your cybersecurity experts. Also, they will help you. They're supposed to help you file a police report. My experience is that local police officers and detectives are not well versed in cybersecurity. Some are, like NYPD, I'd say, is very well versed. They're right there next to the FBI in New York City. They're at the hub of Wall Street and financial services. So I have found the level of competence and knowledge should be higher. But if you're, say, in South Dakota and you've been the victim of a ransomware attack, you need to get your data. You can no longer access your data. They've literally locked it. They've encrypted your database, your mailing lists, your even critical PII, personal identifiable information, which everyone has, with an HR file, which might be like your social security number. So again, preventing it, having the proper vendors and the proper software in place to thwart any ransomware attempts as what we call the first line of defense, that is crucial.
Okay. Just quickly, this is Fight the Fish Week, PH in both cases for the cybersecurity awareness effort. So quickly, what is meant by the term phishing? Maybe some of our listeners aren't aware of what that is.
Sure. It's spelled with like PHISH instead of FI. So it is literally someone, a cyber criminal, literally taking their phishing pole and throwing it out to see where are there vulnerabilities within your system. So phishing exercises, they're literally phishing around your server. They're going into looking at your code to ascertain the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities. So a phishing attempt would be, for example, not just ransomware, but it could include, for example, an attempt of identity theft. So pretending to be the hotel where, if you're the secretary, say, not you particularly, Eugene, but let's say they approach the secretary of a Fortune 100 CEO on a afternoon saying, John Woods is attending our conference next week in Boca. We're going to upgrade him to oceanfront executive suite on the top floor. Click here. It's Friday afternoon. People are busy trying to wrap up everything before they leave for the weekend. They're very, very strategic in terms of when they also choose, these to commit these crimes in essence. And he or he may click on the link, and there you go. The system is now infected with malicious software that can shut down systems and servers. So that's why, again, it's so important. Again, if the company or the bank or even the government entity has the adequate software in place to prevent that, they will detect it, they will block it, and they're constantly screening the threat landscape. Larger banks, for example, Eugene, they're part of a a consortium down in Virginia, where they're required to share information about attempted hacks. These are the largest banks. So we benefit as customers and clients of those banks where we have our money or where we might transact on behalf of our family members. Again, we have those assurances that the regulations and the industry groups require those banks to share information so that what a cyber criminal network attempts to do with, say, JP Morgan, if they're aware of it, and all the other banks can then ramp up and look for certain IP addresses or certain threat patterns, because as you know, many cyber criminals use VPNs to disguise their identity and their geolocation. So again, information sharing is critical.
Okay. Quickly, getting back to the FTF panel that you are a part of, there will be a discussion of the defense in-depth strategy against ransomware. Could we talk a little bit about that? Because I know it's pretty in-depth, and I think when we publish this with an intro story, we can perhaps provide a link to the all the points that you sent me earlier. But could we talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's extremely interesting.
Sure, absolutely. So there is a list of these factors. These are basically, as I mentioned before, your first line of defense. These are the components that really need to be in place to prevent ransomware attacks. So it really starts with having like best in class or best practices software to prevent. It also has to do with training. It extends beyond that to ensure that companies and nonprofits are in compliance with patching. So, for example, if there is an older Microsoft server that's within the system network, it's no longer essential. It's no longer used as, say, business as usual, but it contains client information from, say, 10 years ago, still connected to the system. That's a vulnerability, for example. So it's really about doing a complete review of the system, the software, the vendors, also ensuring that all vendors that are selected are implementing best practices themselves. We've seen some examples of Fortune 100 companies, even Dun & Bradstreet, for example, had a marketing company up in Massachusetts that was a source of a vulnerability where they were able to hack in. So that's really important. So again, setting up all of those, basically your fortress of cybersecurity, having the proper training in place. I will share during the conference, however, some of the additional points that we have implemented on Wall Street. that go beyond, that go above and beyond what is considered, best practice. So it could be that list of 13 factors I sent you.
Mhm.
One could also compress them into a smaller number of categories, and it can certainly be expanded. As I mentioned, we will give some examples.
Oh, great. A reason to tune in. Now, how are data backup strategies a part of an enterprise-wide cybersecurity protection effort?
Yes. So this applies not just, the company where you work. Let's say, Eugene, you work for a local hospital network, and their backup of data is important. This also applies to your home devices, your home laptop, your phone. People use the cloud, and many people who have an iPhone, for example, have set it to automated backup. So this would be like backing up your files, backing up your photographs, backing up your tax returns, in a separate location. From a manual perspective, some people prefer to use an external hard drive to back up. If it's not a super large content, that works, and they like to keep it in a secure location. So if they are hacked or their laptop crashes, they have all their data, right, and they can back up that way. Backing up to the cloud, relying on a very strong, like an Amazon. I'm not pushing any particular vendors, but those particular large Silicon Valley companies that have provided cloud services. Also have to be careful where your data is being backed up. If you ask your vendor, where's your backup, and they say, well, it's in Bolivia because the prices are lower, that's where our server farms are, I wouldn't be as comfortable, and to have my data backed up in a location that may be at higher political risk or higher economic risk. So that's one issue that's really important. And a lot of this back in the sort of 90s at Goldman Sachs, looking at where data was backed up and making sure we had a plan on the plan. So even if plan A fails, then you go to plan B. So that's really sort of the mindset that anyone who's a board member or in a position of cybersecurity and data protection, must live, breathe, sleep every day.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the easier cybersecurity steps that firms and individuals can make happen throughout the month of October and maybe beyond?
Sure, absolutely. I say do a complete assessment of your systems and the technologies you're using. Do you have the most recent version of your anti malware, your anti ransomware in place on your device? Is it across all of your devices? I use this example of, Susan buys her best friend a Apple iPad, right, for her birthday. And the best friend starts to use it to access her client's information, logs on. Well, that device may not be registered with her company. Many corporate IT departments now, because of COVID-19 and other reasons, allow people to use their personal devices, but they also require them to use, in many cases, a digital token. So you have what we call multi-factor authentication. That is critical. So having multi-factor authentication is another first line of defense way to keep the bad guys out. If I'm going into my bank account or even into my online to check my insurance and it's asking me for my code, if I'm keeping my code in a separate spreadsheet that they've already hacked, that's not wise, because then they're going to get access to my insurance information, and maybe they'll set up a wire transfer. That's one example. From an enterprise company perspective, absolutely. Make sure that those backups are complete. And as I mentioned before, have an ongoing discussion with your cybersecurity vendors and, throw those terms out at them. Oh, where's my data being archived? May I see your contingency plan? Right. And also, what kind of insurance do they have? If a company is a victim of a cyber attack and they lose data, and they can put a price on that. So for example, they lost, $750,000 of marketing data. Then that's why they often will have an insurance plan in place as well.
Interesting. Great. Well, great. Those are the top questions I wanted to ask you. And I guess people can hear more from you when they tune into the panel discussion and the other offerings through our ransomware webinar series. But thank you, Dorothy. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Eugene. I look forward to it the end of this month. And as I said, we'll come up with a few practical examples from Wall Street and explain how the first line of defense and then all other lines of defense are crucial for protecting data and people's financial assets.